Good morning. Well, now that we're all here, I am going to go ahead and get started. So, firstly, good morning and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Hayley McGill and today's webinar, Racial Equality in Analytics, is brought to you by the International Institute for Analytics, which is otherwise known as IIA. So just to give you a little bit of background on IIA, we are the industry's leading source of expertise for companies making the transition to data-driven decision-making and advanced analytics. So we offer 4 unbiased client-oriented services, which are designed to help organizations across the entire analytics lifecycle from ideation through strategy and planning to operationalization. So these 4 services are the Research and Advisory Network, the Analytics Leadership Consortium, analytics maturity assessments, as well as our advisory services. So if you did want to know a little bit more about these, just pop over to our website, which is iianalytics.com/services. So before we get started, I did just want to cover a few housekeeping items. So we will be accepting questions throughout the presentation, so you can submit them in the chat window. And as we go, we will have time to revisit them. As we go, we will monitor them and then we will have time to revisit them at the end. We also will be recording this webinar, so if you do have to step away at any point, that's okay. You'll have a recorded version in your inbox tomorrow. So with all of that said, I would like to welcome our speakers. So today we have Robert Cathey, Durrell Robertson and Drew Smith. So Robert Cathey is the Chief Data Officer and Vice President of Global Data Analytics Solutions at VSP, whose corporate vision is to provide access to affordable, high-quality eye care and eyewear to the world. So Robert is responsible for enterprise-wide governance and utilization of information as a strategic asset, data platforms, analytics, data mining, information trading partners, and other channels. So he is accountable for the strategic and operational leadership for the analytics/informatics foundation for the company. And then we have Durrell Robertson. So Durrell is a passionate and seasoned HR professional with over 10 years of diverse experience driving change through data-driven insights in fast-paced, bleeding-edge environments. So Durrell has worked across a wide range of industries from casinos, marketing, healthcare, media, and finance/markets, delivering insights, tech support, and training on a variety of HR management systems, applicant tracking systems, and reporting platforms. And then we have Drew Smith, who is the VP at an IAA. So he's VP of the Analytics Leadership Consortium. So Drew has an extensive background in both global business and analytics. So with all of that said, I'm going to hand over to Drew and we can go ahead and get started.
Great, thanks, Haley. Morning, guys, or good afternoon, I think, to Durrell back on the East Coast. Great to see you again. Great to be here again, hosting this webinar. This is part of a series. We will recap a little bit about last time, but before we do that, I just want to share once again that we're really happy that Durrell and Robert are giving us their time and their input. This is an important part of any analytics leader's journey, ensuring that their algorithms are not causing harm, and also making sure that they're building a analytics practice that is welcoming to people from all backgrounds. So we really want to help our community and our audience members understand a little bit of perspective on the need for racial equality in analytics. And this time we're going to focus a little bit on the way it is to be working in analytics if you are a Black professional, as Robert and Durrell are. So we're going to talk a little bit about the situation as it is, but we're also going to try to brainstorm and think through some ideas on how to make the situation better than it is, because it is not in an acceptable level. We can start with that obvious statement and we can move on from there. So gentlemen, before I recap last time, anything you want to say to get us started in the right place?
Ready to go?
Ready to go. All right. So as I said, this is the second in the series, and what I'd like to repeat from last time is we had the Robert on the call and the wisdom of Dr. Brandeis Marshall. We're really happy to have her as well, and you can always look at that webinar from last time. But from last time, we were really looking at the larger ecosystem of what analytics is all about, and we basically tried to make it really, really simple. We said that algorithmic decision-making can oftentimes just simply turn into racism by math. So we can call it bias, you can call it systemic, you can call it whatever, but what happens is there are real consequences when algorithms decide not to give people a loan, to give people substandard healthcare, to put stores in neighborhoods that have less access to food. These are real consequences that unfortunately disproportionately affect Black folks more negatively than they affect the population as a whole. And then we also talked about this, and we're going to dig a little deeper into this last line, which is that in order for those algorithms to have significantly reduced negative impact, and here I think Dr. Brandeis was quite straight. She said, look, you are not going to eliminate it, but we have to work hard to minimize it. In order to minimize it, we need to have more inclusivity in the creation of the programs that design the data, in the algorithms themselves, as well as, of course, in the data itself. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's a little bit of a brief recap around last time. Robert, you were in last time, or Durrell, maybe you had a chance to look at it. Any thoughts around what we said last time that maybe we should also highlight?
I don't really have anything to add at this point.
Yeah, we had some good coverage last time.
Okay, I promise it won't be mostly me talking. It's been me talking this time, but I'm not the most interesting person on this call by a stretch. So we'll get into it a little bit. I will frame up the next slide, though. I will talk about the fact that it's bad out there when we look at the statistics and we see, for example, how bad is the lack of representation for Black people in the profession of data and analytics or technology at large. Now, these figures are always a little bit tough because how you classify the data, as we all know, as data people, can be difficult. But I'll just throw out some numbers to frame it up, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into the real experience of Robert and Durrell. So by public filings, about 1.5% of the tech talent at Facebook is BIPOC. It's about 4% at Netflix. Interestingly, it's 7% on the creative side at Netflix. And I think that'll change given the commercial success of some of the things that have come out of Netflix recently. It's 4.4% at Google and 3.7, or 4.4 at Microsoft, apologies, and it's 3.7 at Google. So, I mean, those are very low numbers given the fact that by population, depends how you want to measure it again, it's probably 12 to 15% of the American population that identify as Black. So clearly, this is not a good set of numbers when most important businesses in the data field have less than a third of the representation for Black folks. So curious, guys, do these numbers feel about right to you? And what does it feel like if you are among such a slim minority out there in the field? Robert, could you get us started? Because you've been at this game in a couple different companies for quite some time, and you might have some.
Calling me old?
Oh man, don't put me on that spot.
Yeah, I would say that those numbers aren't surprising. Somewhat depressing, but it's been kind of the reality of my career. So I'm kind of used to being one of few or the only one. So that sounds about accurate.
And in my experience, it's not just that first layer, it's that when you crack open even the Black population, it's heavily weighted towards people who aren't American born. So we do have a lot of talented tech coming from people from mostly Central Africa / Nigeria. And so if you're trying to talk about representation, or at least covering the basis for people who have different experiences, even within our the Black representation, it still seems to not be hitting the mark.
And is it different on a career level as well? When you go into the folks that are really building the algorithm, is it more representative? Or on the other side, is it more representative when you're sort of around a circular round table of executives?
Can you restate that again, Drew?
Yeah. So it's on. So all numbers these are averages, right? So we say that 4%. Let's call it 4%. So 4% of the tech talent at the top data companies are Black folks, and your experience bears this out. Do you see that is it better represented at the more entry level jobs? Is it better represented in mid management? Is better represented at top management, or is it really just equally bad across the corporate ladder?
I would say, in my observation, it's equally bad. I think just in general in executive positions, it's very sparse. I'm often, again, the only one in the room. It's pretty sparse.
Yeah, and in my experience, sometimes it's passing the message up the chain. And that even if there's good representation, especially at the bottom of the pyramid, at any rung, if there's someone who's just not committed to it, or they're not bought into it, or they just don't care, that's often where the story stops. So yeah, there's not great representation at the top, but even in the in-between, there seems to always be this gap that's hard to get on the other side of.
I was looking for some future hope, but I'm not getting it. I'm sorry. But it's the truth, right? So the truth is that the numbers are bad, and it feels bad. And I'm curious if it, has it. I'm really curious because you guys have been, really talented. You're really talented and really well regarded in this field for a good reason. But has it made you think maybe that data isn't the place for you?
I'll start and I'll say, no, it doesn't make me feel that way. I have a passion for data and what it can do for a business. So that's really not a matter of my ethnicity or my race. And just being a Black professional, you have to have a lot of resilience. You have to be driven and have a lot of faith in yourself to rise above and to recognize that, you're going to be judged by how you look. And what I personally try to do is make sure that I am the opposite of those stereotypes that are often associated with being Black. Even to the point of when I'm writing a memo, I double and triple check it to make sure that the spelling's correct and all of that good stuff, because I don't want people buying into a negative stereotype about me. So it's really about having that resilience and the drive and the belief in yourself that helps you rise above being the only one or being one of few.
There's nowhere else I'd rather be, but I am very much aware of the uphill climate is. Like right out of college, I did this AmeriCorps program for a year, and then I moved to be where my parents were in Las Vegas. And to get a job, I took off my first name, Durrell, off the resume and put my middle name, Blake. And that was really important in helping me get, my legs under my first real job. That, and I also was acutely aware of the fact that, when they swap out names on resumes, the callback ratio is such that a Black person with a 4-year degree gets called back about as often as the same resume with a white name on it with only a high school diploma. So I'm aware of it. I know that you have to deal with it. Sometimes it is infuriating, but it certainly hasn't made me think of going somewhere else where it might be easier.
Well, and I would just add that these numbers aren't isolated to data and analytics.
Fair enough.
Other areas of IT and other areas of business. So no matter where you go, you're going to have similar challenges. So that really isn't a factor.
This conversation is so uplifting.
Well, I'm uplifted by the fact that you're going to stick with data and analytics, both of you guys, because I enjoy our conversations, and I really want you to stay in data because I think you're huge contributors on every side. So happy to have that. One of the things I thought about in doing a little bit of study up for this is are there root causes for this in data analytics that are maybe unique or different or exaggerated than some basic root causes for a lack of opportunity for Black folks? And in particular, one of the things that struck me was this finding that people who identified as Black in online, massive online courses like Coursera and Udemy, those guys, they were more inclined to take UI UX courses and data analytics courses than they were to take data science courses. And I'm not the type to say that data science is the thing that saves all data, but it is a well-paying role. It is a role with influence. It is the people who can help build the algorithms, which are have more equity in them. And one of the researchers found that the reason for that was that because the school system in America is still somewhat segregated and still somewhat underfunded in Black neighborhoods, that the fundamentals of the mathematical education were off. So are there other things that you think are unique to data and analytics that make it have slightly lower representation? To your point, Robert, it's probably not 6%, it's 6% I don't know, marketing. I'm just making numbers up, but still it's really bad in data. And why is it worse in data maybe than it might be in other places?
Want to take this, Robert?
I'll start and I'll let you. I mean, I definitely do believe the disparities in education are a big part of it. I also think that this type of work isn't really glorified in the Black community either, right? So there's not as much awareness, I think, of the career opportunities. And I think especially with data science, it's, you certainly have to have strong mathematical skills, but in some ways, data scientists are also kind of unicorns, right? Because they have to understand business, they have to be able to program, they have to understand data, and they have to pull all of that together to make an impact on a business outcome. So I don't think a lot of students are aware of that. And unfortunately, a lot of what's glorified in the Black community is professional sports, right? And so we don't get as much exposure to careers like the ones that I have and that Durrell has and others in the space. So I think that's a big part of it, unfortunately.
In my experience, definitely the case that, if you are born into a community that isn't great, finding your way out only has so many paths. And we just don't see a lot of people data sciencing their way out of, impoverished communities. But also in my experience, it's the small differences in the beginning that balloon over the course of someone's career. One of the things that I like a lot about data science and about analytics is that people don't necessarily know what it takes. And they're more interested in, what you can accomplish, if that makes sense. So it's not so much that I have, the pedigree or things on my resume. It's, can I build a model that works? And can I automate something that works? And so it can be sometimes a leveling field, but if you are off early in your career by just a little bit, maybe it's because you're less likely to be hired, maybe it's because you're more likely to be fired, all other things being equal. Over the course of 2, 3, or 4 years, you start to see this gap in ability, and then that turns into huge disparities a decade into people's careers. I think the example that sticks with me the most is that in Canada, their hockey league, people who were born in the third quarter of the year, they represent 3 times the representation of people born in the first quarter. And the reason why is that around 8 to 9 years old is when they start going to camps. And the kids who are a little bit bigger play a little bit better, and they go to camps and they get more coaching. They play against other students who are better. And so over the course of their careers, it creates this huge disparity between the first and the last quarter of people's birth years. And it's just hard to overcome those small differences early, and they balloon. And then of course, towards the end, people who are represented in the National Hockey League feel like they earned being there. They feel like the key to their success was the effort and the grind and the stick-to-itiveness. And they're completely in their blind sides as to all of the things that they happen to have been lucky to either have or lucky to not have had. So for me, when I think about the representation of Black people in data analytics, it has more to do with the beginning disparities and the inability or the lack of energy to close those as people move through their careers.
I think that's a great point. And that really reminds me a bit too of bias, right? And there's a lot of subconscious, unconscious bias and negative stereotypes against Black people, right? And so if you think of the concept of affinity bias, that's where you recognize something in someone that's familiar and you want to take that person under your wing and you want to develop them. And so if the people who have all of the authority and can create the opportunities and are not Black, and they have this affinity bias that we all have, they're less likely to take that Black person under their wing. They're less likely to promote that Black person compared to the kid that reminds them of their nephew, right? So it's important for leaders of all backgrounds to be conscious of your bias and to learn to manage those and to specifically seek out people who are different and learn about them so that you can open your mind and you can create more equity as a leader.
Oh, and then one last thing. When I was in high school, a lot of people went into the military. It was just a kind of public school I went to. And I remember my senior year of college, I was very much decided that I would go to college. It wasn't assumed up until that point, but I knew I wanted to go. And there were people who were recruiting in our cafeteria, and they were very, very pushy. There was a guy I got into this long 15-minute conversation with about how I needed to sign up. And I said, I think I want to go to college. And he was like, but just in case. And the truth is that if you have certain jobs and opportunities coming at your face, it's easier to go down those paths. And the truth is that there was no one in my school in the cafeteria 3 months in a row telling people, you need to sign up for this internship, you need to take this course, that you like, oh, I know you want to go into the sciences, but there's also data analytics, which is somewhat adjacent, and it's not, I'm trying to push it into your face. And the truth is that, you know, again, if you do that very early in someone's career, in those first 4 years, if that's the path they go down, it's hard to get back onto a track that might end you going into something like data analytics, even if it suits your skills and it's something that you would find really gloriously beneficial.
You know, that I had a very similar experience when I was a senior in high school, and the Marines tried to recruit me. In fact, they came to my house, picked me up, took me to the recruiting station, and really pressured me because I got a good score on the ASVAB and everything. And the recruiter said to me, because I was like, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that. I think I want to go the college route. And he actually said to me, a famous person once said, and I think you know who this person is, that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And I was just, that just convinced me I wasn't going to go that path, right? And I went home, talked to my father, who was a Marine, a retired Marine at the time. And he said, you know, and that's why you're not going to waste your mind in the Marines as an enlisted man. I want you to go to college. And not to disparage enlisted people, because again, my father was one. He is a great mentor for me. So no disrespect to enlisted people, but the point was, being a Black man, the expectation wasn't necessarily for me to go to college. It was for me to enroll in the military right away, right out of high school.
Yeah. Wow. That doesn't sound like recruitment. That sounds like kidnapping. But fascinating. I never thought about it from the other perspective, which is it's not only about the avenues which maybe are less open to you, but it's about the avenues which are maybe perceived to be more open to you. As you say, Durrell, like this was the avenue that road was plowed down. All the trees were clear and the tarmac was quite laid, versus the one you've chosen. You've had to do a little bit of extra hard work yourself. Fascinating stuff. One of the things I'm also interested in, and this is one where when we met, guys, I was very honest that I read something I didn't really understand. I'd love your feedback on it, which is that one of the early founders in these organizations that support Black folks in data. So it's a woman who supported a group called Black for Data, I think. She mentioned that a lot of times when she discusses in these roundtables or these forums with people of color, that they struggle with identifying themselves as data people in their larger cultural context. And that's just not my experience. Obviously, I'm not Black, but I also don't really struggle with telling people what profession I have. And I'm just curious, I'm having trouble with this. Obviously, you can see I'm having trouble getting the words out, but is this a problem in data analytics that folks in the Black community don't feel they want to raise a flag and say, I work in data and analytics? Because that's a pretty cool job as far as I'm concerned, but I'm me.
Robert.
Okay, I mean, I'll start. I haven't had.
Sorry for struggling with that one.
I have not had a problem with that. Certainly, it's difficult at times to kind of translate to people who aren't in data what we do. But I would say that's universal, not really race-based. I would say my experience, as a Black man, it is a challenge, both being one of the few but there are also challenges being a Black man and having other Black people judge you and assume you're a sellout or an Uncle Tom because you might speak proper English, and you might not speak a lot of slang and do some of the things that are stereotypical of Black folks. So it's damned if you do and damned if you don't often, which again is why the resilience and believing in yourself is so critical as a Black professional in this country.
When I was in college, I went down to a hate group in Atlanta. I know I'm being very specific. And there was a guy there who was from my college. He'd been there for several years. He had on his class ring, which I hope he didn't do every day. And when we closed the door, I asked him what it was like being Black in that office. And he very directly said, it can be a pain, but it's better than it used to be. And it threw me aback. I had never heard such candor from someone I had only just met. And his reaction to my reaction was, well, you're gonna find out anyway. And I think like the nature of that question and that conversation is played out in a lot of people's careers when they're trying to figure out what path to go down. And the reason I didn't, of course, end up working there is because I'm tired and things are already hard enough. And if you tell me that it's better than it used to be, but it's still a pain in the ass, I would rather find something where I get a decent return on my effort and that it's not always fun upstream. So when I think it comes to being in analytics, it's not easy. There are few of us who are in it, and very few of us can say it's an easy path. So people who have the luxury of being able to choose what career they head down into, I can see why this would be less appealing than some of their other available options.
Yeah, super interesting. Because the other thing that struck me was interesting was like there are some fields which are maybe have better representation of Black people, but they are not well represented even in analytics. And I picked up a couple articles which shows that the same stats that we saw from Facebook and Google and Microsoft is true in the offices and the statistical offices in particular of sports teams. There's one recently in the Boston Globe highlighted by one of our experts into this chat, and then also which I'll share. But also I picked up on one too. Is data increasingly a part of everyday conversations in Black communities in the way that it is in many sports-centered communities? If you go online and read about sports, it's a lot of times about all sorts of Moneyball-inspired analytics into basketball and world soccer and stuff like that.
I'll let you do that there, Durrell.
You're welcome to say that's a dumb question. I'm the one asking him. You're welcome to tell me that's a dumb question.
No, honestly, I think if you just don't see any visibility into a specific career path, it just, there's reason to have anxiety. The truth is that in this field, I can't think of who, other than Robert, is like the Oprah of data analytics. Someone who's very visible, someone who you can track out for your career and see what path they might go on, as as improbable as it may be. And so I just think it doesn't take up much space in a conversation of people who are all trying to figure out where to go and how to get there.
It's true.
Thank you, Oprah.
We got you a new nickname, Robert.
Oh, man.
On the flip side, so focused more on the analytics community, which of course is not a community in the same sense, but I often wonder what are the attributes of an analytics community, generically speaking, that are helpful or, in another sense, harmful for inclusive practices. And here specifically, I think about the false notion that because we work in analytics, that we only make rational decisions, right? Like humans are not rational beings with emotions. We are emotional beings who can rationalize. And that's true of analytics professionals, even if they think they're so smart because they study the numbers. So what are some of the ways that the analytics field itself is maybe more or less welcoming from your perspective to Black folks?
I guess I would say I don't know that most Black folks would interpret this work as cool, right? I think geeky is more associated with this type of work, right? Uh, I know a lot of professionals in the field, right, who are not geeks, who are cool, like Durrell. But I think that's part of it, you know. That's about the only thing that comes to mind for me in that regard.
Oh, where to go with this? Relatively early in my career, I remember I did this big diversity analysis for a company that had really robust data and sufficient sample sizes to really needle and figure out, all of the moving parts so we could have a robust conversation. And one of the headwinds that I was surprised to encounter was that even when faced with incontrovertible proof that there's an issue, the VP of our department still couldn't be bought into the idea that we needed to do something about it. So we saw that Black candidates were far less likely to get hired. And her response was, yeah, but what's the quality of those candidates? And then when we looked at internal promotions, of which there were many going back a decade, and then it said, well, it might be a culture issue. And then when we talked about the attrition rates, she says, well, maybe it's because of their performance. When we control for performance, then there was something else. And so it drove me crazy. But the truth was that for her and the rest of our management team, it was just baked into her understanding of how things are, that some people aren't going to have great outcomes. I actually heard one of the directors who reported up to her when they first saw the analysis say, oh, that looks awful, but what do you expect? And in my heart, I said, better than this. And I think that was just kind of the undercurrent in a lot of the work that we did. And that was really frustrating, but I think that that was the culture within the department, to expect certain outcomes and to not have a bias for action in that specific area.
Yeah, and I think that, Durrell, is unfortunately probably more common than not, right? And the way you were describing how those leaders responded to the data, it's clear that they were not aware, or maybe they were, of their own biases and how they were applying those to the data, right? To suggest that, well, maybe it was a performance issue. Well, why? Because there's stereotypes that Black people are not going to perform as well, that Black people are lazy. I mean, that story was riddled with bias, right? But unfortunately, that is the reality of business and of human nature, right? So it's not fun to hear those stories, but it's not surprising, right?
I had a really interesting around this analysis actually with my manager at the time, someone who I love and I enjoyed working with and alongside him. But I remember my saying, what if the trends and the disparities we were seeing were only related to our Jewish employees? Like, would we have the same shrug, or would we think this is really, really problematic and something has to change? And I remember his response was, yeah, but the leaders in these organizations have other things to focus on. That they already have a full plate, and that diversity is this other optional thing, that it just has a lower priority. To which I said, if we have one of these VPs who has a property with 10,000 employees and they have no Black employees, is that acceptable? To which he told me, and I'll never forget it, maybe I should go work at a nonprofit because my commitment to seeing certain outcomes and my own willingness to tolerate certain stuff was just seen as being incongruent with the culture. And that was when I started therapy. I thought I was going crazy. It was very helpful to pay someone else to say, I'm not crazy.
You're not crazy.
I'd love, Durrell, if you could tell me a little bit more about that. And the reason I ask is I think anybody who's in analytics has had the frustration where you've done the work, you've got the proof, you can improve the outcome of the business. In this case, it's along the lines of diversity, but it could be even along the lines of profit or sales or whatever. And the executive just kicks you out the room. And I've been pissed about that, but that's just an executive deciding they don't want to grow their business, which is like, man, that you're an idiot. But it's much more personal when they're saying what they said to your analysis. I'm just curious, besides therapy, how do you deal with that kind of crap?
I left that team, and I was able to go lead a team doing database marketing, which was very gratifying. I got poached from that team to go somewhere else, and right before I started there, I got poached somewhere else internally and got to go lead a team, which was really satisfying. But yeah, I just was not going to sit around and like, I refused to let certain people in that organization have the benefit of my talent or the luxury of my company. So God bless them, but on the other side of that project, I just eyed the door.
There's a T-shirt in there or something, like you don't get the luxury of something is in there, a bumper sticker, a T-shirt, at least a meme, but that's maybe for people more talented in different ways than I. Super interesting. Guys, we've got tons of chat questions coming, which I'm adoring, and they're actually pivoting us to where we want to be, which is to sort of like, this is what we said, it's not good enough. It's harmful to individuals, it's harmful to companies, it's harmful to society. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do to bridge what we might call the education and opportunity divide, right? So those two are interrelated. I think, Durrell, like you said, if you don't get the opportunity and you get laid off first, and then your career takes a half or 2 steps back, eventually that accumulated interest means that by the time you're 50, you aren't leading an analytics team because you got basically cheated out of opportunities along the way. So from your point of view, either your personal experience or your experience, Robert, you've been a leader and a mentor and a big proponent of diversity in your company. What are some of the things you think we can do as individuals and as companies to bridge this divide?
Yeah, there's a ton of things, I think, and it starts with understanding yourself, right? And I would give this advice to anyone, but it's especially important when you're leading people, is to understand, who am I? What are my biases? How do those affect my decisions? And I recall a webinar from Cook Ross where there was a slide in there that talked about, we see the world not as it is, but as we are, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about, if you're about to buy a new car, do you all of a sudden see a lot of those cars on the road? And the fact is, there's really not more of those cars. Your awareness of them has been raised because you're interested in it, right? And so it's a matter of recognizing that how we view the world, how we've been socialized, may not be accurate. It's going to be different than the experience of someone else. And we have to recognize that. And there's the Harvard Implicit Association test. They have a number of bias tests. That's a good tool to help you see, do you have a preference toward Black or do you have a preference toward white? And it's okay if you have a preference toward white. It's important to understand that and the implications of that. And some of that, I think, played out in the situation that Durrell was sharing, right? And so it's really important to understand your biases. I think as a leader, especially an executive, it's important to seek out a mentor from a dimension of diversity that's very different than yours. And so at BSP, one of the things we're implementing is reverse mentoring, where we assign a person of diversity to an executive to help that executive understand the experiences of someone who's very different than them in terms of ethnicity, in terms of role, and all of those good things, right? And so those are some of the things. And then also for companies, if you don't already have employee resource groups, that's another way to help people feel included. And it's really not about segregation. It's about creating a safe space for people who are of a similar affinity that also allows for advocates of that affinity to participate, but also, more importantly, creates an opportunity for executives and managers to learn more about those cultures and those affinities, lifestyle, ethnicity, that are different than theirs, because it's the reality of their employees. And it's important to recognize that we don't want people to assimilate and lose who they are, right? We want to maximize what they bring to the table. And if they don't feel included, you're not going to get that. So those are just some of the things that I would recommend that leaders do and companies do.
All right, piggyback off of both of those. One of my favorite frameworks is the Harlem Children's Zone. Amazing organization, the blueprint for Obama's Promised Neighborhoods. And one of the amazing things that they were able to accomplish by blanketing a specific area, specific blocks in Harlem with all types of social services, a lot of which were already available, but now they were very comprehensive and also well coordinated. What they found was that if you apply these interventions early and throughout someone's early childhood, what they saw were they were able to, in one generation, eliminate the disparities in educational outcomes and income from Black and white people in Manhattan, which was amazing. And what I got from that is one, you need all of the services that basically all employees at some point in their careers have made available to them. And so when you're talking about underserved communities, recognizing that they come with a deficit that you have to be willing to kind of to make an investment in if you want to close the gap. But also, just like Robert was saying, when it comes to mentors, I really do believe that everyone is mountain climbing. And when you slip, the question is, how far do you fall? And if you're only connected to other people who are institutionally disempowered and they're not really well connected to the movers and people with great visibility within your organization, the truth is that when one person falls, several other people will fall. But if you have an organization where people are well represented, there is reverse mentorship, and these are connections that are durable. In my experience, you close the gap almost completely between employment outcomes for Black and brown people compared to white and Asians. And so if you can stand up a good mentorship program that sticks, and if you can build up good mentorship muscles so that new employees can really get plugged in out the gate, I think that's probably the most effective thing you can do that's durable and is shown to have the outcomes that people are hoping for. I think when it comes to like implicit bias training or sensitivity training, the hard part is that it's easy to do, it's hard to do well. And so for every one organization that figures it out and able to see real return on that investment, there are a couple dozen that don't see the outcomes they want, and it leaves a sour taste in their mouths.
Yeah, super great. I want to dig into the mentoring bit a lot because it's coming through the chat. It came through your conversations, and if I lay it bare. Young Black professionals starting in analytics who join an organization are very unlikely to find senior Black analytics professionals. So if you are someone like myself who's been in this industry for a while and you want to contribute with your skills and mentoring, what are some things that you should be aware of that maybe this young Black professional won't be willing to tell you? You know what I mean? So you start this relationship, and a mentor relationship is always a little uneven, if we're honest, right? I've had mentors and they've been great people, but I've been a bit in all of them because I have this career I want, and But so what are something that folks who maybe are like me should know if they have an opportunity to mentor a young analytics professional who happens to be Black?
I would say that be genuine, be honest, be honest about the things you just said, Drew, right? Because if you show that you're human and that you're not sure about certain things, but you're willing to learn and that you're well-intended, people are gonna trust you more, right? So the more genuine and transparent you are as a mentor, the more your mentee is gonna trust you. And then the more they trust you, the more they're gonna open up to you. So that would be my suggestion.
I would say be aggressive. be aggressive. I can't help myself. One of the things that I've definitely, because I've had the luxury of having some really amazing mentors over my career, some of whom are still, on my shoulders. It's that I've had opportunities just like with the, the Army recruiters in my high school cafeteria. I've had people who just push opportunities onto me. I've had the luxury of having people who just ask nicely to be on my team. And so that's how I acquired new direct reports. I've had people who say, you should be running this department. And I say, but I've only had so much experience. And they say, that wasn't my question. And I say, okay. So if you really want to be a good mentor or a sponsor, just recognize that you're going to have to sometimes push them. Because often you're the only person in their ear telling them, don't wait until you feel completely confident. You got to get on the other side of it. I'll share one thing that I hope this lands well. So I will say that I tell this to people who are stuck in their heads, especially under a pile of imposter syndrome. And I'm not sure exactly where it works, but every time I've said it, I've seen the light come on in someone's eyes, and that's enough to like get them to lean in. I've always said, carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man. Now, what does that mean? I don't define it, but what the reaction has always been is,
I get it.
Yeah, I can ask for a raise. Yeah, I can apply for this job. They can just tell me no. And it's weird, but if you're mentoring someone who still has, their own, self-biases in their own mind as to what they're capable of or what path they can pursue, your job as a mentor, aside from being genuine, is to push them into opportunities that they won't otherwise step into.
That's a great point. I would also say, and this would be my advice for the few Black leaders in this profession, that it's important to reach out to people who are starting out and make yourself available and create a community that helps them succeed. We've formed kind of an informal group where I work, and we meet on a regular basis, and we try to make sure that we educate each other on things that Black folks aren't often conditioned throughout their life around financial investment, career development, health and wellness, fitness, all of those types of things that unfortunately aren't as prevalent and aren't as top of mind in the Black community. So it's really important to make yourself available. And I might have shared this term Ubuntu on the last webinar, I don't remember, but it's really an African term that means I am because we are. And it's really about making sure that we lift each other up as opposed to just lifting myself up. So I think it's important as a Black leader to make yourself available to other Black professionals, not just Black professionals, but Black professionals, because we do experience inequality. We do experience these biases that other people don't experience. And as a person in a position to influence things in the company, I feel an obligation to be available and to help those individuals navigate through the corporate culture, give them career advice and all of that kind of stuff.
That's a great segue, Robert. I'm a little bit interested also from a manager's point of view, and in particular, you said something, Durrell, which is that very, very few implicit bias trainings actually stick, and we know that some companies treat their diversity work as a checkbox. So, as a manager, you guys are both managers, so that requires a leadership beyond your own team. Robert, you're in the C-suite, so you have that influence. What do managers need to do to kind of make these things that we know can work, recruitment, diversity, implicit bias? What are some of the things as a manager you think managers should do better to step up and make them more effective?
I'll let you go first, Durrell.
We've done a cool analysis that showed we asked people who are the 2 to 4 people you can go to when you need help in your role, like when you hit a wall. or basically when you're rock climbing, you slip, who are the people you can count on to keep you from falling too far. And when you control for that, a lot of the disparities in retention and promotion start to go away. And so if I were a manager, I would spend a lot of time thinking about whether my Black employees are well integrated into the team, if they do have a relationship where they can depend on someone and other people on their team can depend on them. And to the extent to which they may not have that, click down, check in with them, find someone that you can plug them into. I was really blessed to have our head of HR reach out to me the day after George Floyd died. And she just said, "Hey, you're on my mind. Are you okay?" And that made me burst into tears at my desk. But she's just acutely aware of the fact that I was very new to the organization, and she just wanted to make sure that I wasn't flailing or spiraling out, especially while we were working remotely. So if you know that you have a Black teammate, for example, who is well integrated into your team, they're probably going to be okay. But if you have someone who's dangling, in other words, they have one person they can depend on, and that person may not stick around for a long time, you probably need to click in and get a hold of them so that way, when the ship gets bumped, they don't go overboard.
And I would add, like you said earlier, Durrell, be aggressive, right? As a leader, to create equity and inclusion, you have to actively do that. It doesn't happen on its own, right? And you can't assume that everybody's got an equal playing field. You can't assume that, we're all the same and you follow the golden rule that says treat others how you want to be treated. It should be treat others how they want to be treated, which means you have to actively understand your people and make sure that you're not applying stereotypes to them. And even to the point of all Black people are different. All of our experiences are different. We're not all in the same bucket. I mean, I've had experiences where I grew up, my parents are Catholic, grew up in the Catholic Church. I shared this with an employee years ago, and the employee said to me, "Wait a minute, you're intelligent, you're articulate, you're Catholic, you can't be Black." Right? And so these are the experiences we have in the workplace where people have these assumptions. And she was kidding, but some of that was coming from bias, right? And at first I laughed, but I walked away and I felt insulted, right? Because there's a predisposed notion of what we should be and what we shouldn't be. And it's important to recognize everybody's different. And race is just one dimension of who we are, but it again takes active involvement to understand your people and create inclusion.
The stories are really sticking with me.
How do you think we feel?
Again? Sorry?
Is that how you think we feel?
I know. I barely know, but I'm trying. So one of the things, actually, I do love a good story. So I'm definitely going to listen to the recording and print Durrell's thing onto a T-shirt. All proceeds will go to you, Durrell. No problem. But do you guys have any folks in the analytics community, Black folks, that you look at and go, yeah, you know what, this is when I feel a little rough, this is what I remember. And I'm thinking in particular about the fact that the movie Hidden Figures probably did more to encourage young Black women to realize that they are more than capable of entering STEM fields. So I think that's fantastic. Any stories you got that you think we should be telling around the analytics campfire that will stick with people?
Those nothing comes to mind, frankly. One thing that does come to mind that's been a bit inspirational for me working at VSP is the fact that one of our founding fathers was a Black man, Dr. Marvin Poston. He was the first Black optometry student at UC Berkeley School of Optometry. And when I found that out, I felt very inspired because at the time that I started at BSP in 2001, there weren't a lot of people of color in leadership, and to find out that one of our founders was very inspirational. And so I've always made it a point to share that with people who are new to the company, especially Black people, because it is inspirational. But in terms of just the field of analytics, I can't think of a Black role model that inspired me into the career. I kind of just fell into the career and developed a passion for it.
Yeah, the story that I must anchor to is Robert's. so that's there. I have I have talked to people who are trying to pivot into people analytics, often with a psychology background. And one of the stories I tell them about the value of being at the table was when I got to build a HR scorecard for organization, and one of the VP of talent acquisition came and we talked about what metrics they wanted to use for success. And he had an idea of just measuring the percent of our hires who were already employed at the time. This was, of course, there have been a couple of recessions. This was during after they had a lot of layoffs. And in his mind, his definition of success was, if we're hiring people who are already employed, we're hiring the cream of the crop, because people who are unemployed for a reason. And I was really, really happy to be at the table. I was really happy to have a conversation with them about why that was not going to fly. And that is something that you get the opportunity to do, that you bring to the table to cover someone's blind spots. That is extremely gratifying, and it may be more gratifying than a path that is less frustrating. Yeah.
Well, super good. We've got great questions. I tried to bring them into the field, into the conversation. I'm not sure I captured them all, but this recording will be available. People can reach out to us as well. Because I think that you guys are now some of the heroes of the story. I think you are role models for your willingness to share openly and the great work that you do. So I'm really super, super happy and honored to have been a part of it. But I want to give you guys the last word by all means. We'll start with Durrell and we'll end with Robert, if that's okay.
Oh, this was so gratifying. I just enjoyed the topic, conversation, getting to meet you, Drew, getting to look up to you, Robert, and count me in as I would happy to join all the other webinars. I want to see more conversations that you guys set up, and also anything else that I can push out.
What Durrell said. Yeah, I think this is a great forum, and I appreciate and Drew for you all putting this together. It's created an opportunity for me to connect with other Black professionals like Durrell and Mike Brandeis, and I look up to you as well, Durrell. So you are doing a great job, and I think this is a great forum to help raise awareness and hopefully generate more action that leads to more equity and more inclusion and the advancement of people of all backgrounds in the field of data and analytics. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thanks again, gentlemen. We'll make this recording and the previous recordings available. Some of the links that we've referenced, some of the research that I've found will be there as well. Otherwise, have a great day. Thanks very much. Be well.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.